Silence always held secrets. My grandfather told me that once, hunched over a whiskey-damp table in Oak Ridge, under dim kitchen bulbs that tinted his skin the color of old copper casings. He'd been a man made brittle by silence, carved by secrets kept so deeply he forgot how to speak them. But he remembered enough to warn me, whispered through whiskey-thickened breath. Silence isn't empty. It's crowded. I thought of him now, as I buttoned the high collar of my uniform, carefully avoiding the reflection of my eyes in the mirror. It felt dishonest somehow to look myself in the eye before a mission like this. Routine and superstition blurred indistinguishably in my rituals. 4 egg whites and black coffee, 30 push-ups slow and careful, the heavy Zippo lighter in my left breast pocket never filled, never lit. It wasn't comfort. It was a weight, a reminder of lineage, atomic shadows cast by other men's deeds long before my first breath. Finally, the knife strapped flat against my thigh, my fingers brushing over the etched message on its inner steel. If I forget, cut through. Routine wasn't reassurance, it was just armor. I'd been building that armor since I was 17. Grew up just outside the old Manhattan Project perimeter in Oak Ridge, Tennessee, where fences buzzed and nobody asked questions they wanted real answers to. I joined the Air Force right out of high school, pararescue first, then Black Tier Special Tactics. Most people earn their rank with politics. I earned mine dragging 3 men out of a collapsed time fracture in North Africa and never speaking about it again. Command says that kind of silence proves reliability. I know better. It just proves I learned where not to look. Site Epsilon lay beneath Groom Lake like a buried weapon, and descending to it felt less like a passage downward and more like slipping sideways, reality peeling away layer by layer until only the logic of secrecy remained. The elevator dropped smoothly through rock bed and reinforced blast shielding, each subtle shift reverberating gently through my boots like distant, submerged detonations. Beside me stood Dr. Ilyas Arden, slender and rigid, his eyes flicking rapidly behind frameless glasses as he silently reviewed the briefing papers clasped to his chest. He wore civilian clothes that looked awkward beneath his tactical vest, carefully ironed yet somehow ill-fitting in the hard context of this subterranean world. He wasn't military. DARPA loaned him out through some shell foundation that didn't officially exist. Civilian clearance, top-tier brain. Arden was the one who built the models predicting Gate 9's opening schedule, right down to the hour. This wasn't just his first field deployment. It was his first time standing this close to the thing he thought he understood. Every few seconds, his fingers tapped softly against the folder's edge, a nervous rhythm betraying the measured facade. Beside Arden stood Captain Merrick Lowen, still and expressionless, holding a small leather-bound journal instead of a Bible. He wore no cross, no rank insignia, only a matte name patch and quiet presence. Officially, he was attached to the mission as a non-combatant ethics observer. Unofficially, he was the spiritual failsafe. The Air Force only sends men like Lowen when they're afraid the mission won't just kill bodies, but beliefs. Lowen's calm radiated outward, solid, ancient, and composed, though I wondered what secrets he had already witnessed in places he would never openly name. As the doors parted, we stepped into a concrete passage lined with angular, recessed sconces that cast clean geometric pools of white light against the matte walls. At intervals, sealed doors marked labs and equipment bays, each labeled by bland numbers or acronyms like prayers whispered in a dead language. QSD-3, Lab C1, Neuromorphic Storage Unit. I caught Arden briefly tracing a finger along these inscriptions, as if decoding a sacred script, lips silently moving. Lowen only glanced briefly at each one, seemingly absorbing without judgment, taking notes I couldn't see. Ahead, the corridor widened abruptly into Gate Chamber 9. It rose 2 stories in height, dominated by a darkened quantum aperture. The gate, its surface like polished obsidian, ringed by clusters of equipment whose cables snaked across the floor in precise, organic patterns. Monitoring stations circled it like small altars, manned by technicians whose faces were drawn, absorbed into screens overflowing with fractal telemetry and wave-collapsing data streams. The aperture itself was dormant, a glossy disc refracting subtle reflections, bending the edges of the room into fluid distortions. Colonel Hardesty from AFOCI stood near the gate's perimeter, waiting rigidly as we approached. He looked older than the last time, grey streaking aggressively through his cropped hair, the wrinkles around his eyes deeper, his mouth drawn into a line permanently shaped by difficult secrets. He nodded sharply, acknowledging our arrival without preamble or greeting. "Major Knox," he began, voice crisp and efficient. "Gate 9 reopened spontaneously 27 minutes ago. We've had no previous indications of activity, no precursor signals. Current theories from quantum ops suggest dimensional resonance, but Arden will elaborate." Hardesty glanced toward Arden with a restrained impatience. Arden cleared his throat softly, stepping forward hesitantly, eyes never quite meeting ours. "The aperture was scheduled for activity 11 months from now. My models—" His voice drifted momentarily, a tremor of uncertainty breaking through the precise vocabulary. "The predictions no longer hold. Quantum drift has accelerated beyond modeled parameters. Something—" Arden's eyes flickered nervously toward the gate. "Something has changed fundamentally on the other side." "You're saying the gate was opened intentionally from Ash Earth?" Lowen spoke quietly, his voice a rhythmic murmur layered with careful neutrality. It was unsettling, somehow, that calmness, like a man who'd accepted worse possibilities long before they appeared. Arden hesitated, weighing his words carefully. "Not intentionally in any way we understand. It's more like an automatic reflex in reality, akin to breathing after near drowning." Hardesty's expression tightened. "Whatever caused it, the aperture isn't responding to normal shutdown procedures. Command believes the threat level justifies immediate reconnaissance. Major Knox, your team will enter the aperture, reconnoiter the parallel Groom Lake facility, gather intelligence, and secure the quantum device controls from the other side, if possible." I nodded once, curtly. "Understood." Hardesty stepped closer, lowering his voice, almost conspiratorial. "We intercepted fragments of a radio burst, likely automated. One intelligible phrase. We burned. It watched. Now it's your turn. Assume hostile conditions." His words settled in me heavily, not as a warning but as confirmation. Danger was familiar, even welcome. It meant I had a defined enemy. The silence of the aperture, however, was something far worse. A void filled only by speculation and uncertainty. Beside me, Lowen wrote something in his journal, his pen moving swiftly, then paused, eyes lingering thoughtfully on Arden. Arden shifted uneasily, adjusting his glasses with unnecessary precision. A sudden motion at the far monitoring station drew my attention. A technician leaned forward urgently, pale, face strained in disbelief. I followed his gaze to the aperture. Its mirrored surface rippled slowly as if pressed by a force from behind. A fine grey ash sifted gently through the surface, settling silently across the polished floor, soft as powdered bone. Arden approached instinctively, eyes widening in fascination or dread, I couldn't tell. Another shift, more forceful. The surface bulged subtly, disgorging something that fell to the floor with a muffled crack. It lay there, stark under the clinical light. A broken human shape, blackened and fractured, formed entirely of fused carbon and bone. Its limbs were twisted delicately, like a sculpture posed in mockery of human frailty. In its chest gleamed something metallic, a small steel plate with words etched harshly into its scorched surface. We burned. It watched. Now it's your turn. Silence crowded around us, thickened by the quiet sounds of technicians shifting uneasily, by Arden's stifled intake of breath, by Lowen gently stepping forward to kneel beside the shattered form, carefully tracing the engraved message with reverent fingers. I felt the weight of responsibility settle deeper inside my chest. pressing insistently at the edges of my composure. My grandfather's words echoed silently, urgently, warning me again about silence and the secrets it kept. "It's an invitation," Lowen murmured softly, almost reverently to no one in particular. "No," Arden whispered in response, shaking his head gently, eyes distant. "It's an answer, one we don't want." I clenched my fists tightly, drawing control back within. Routine, discipline, silence, armor against chaos. "Gear up," I ordered quietly, firmly, my voice echoing flatly from the walls. "We go through in 20. They turned toward me, Arden nervous yet strangely expectant, Lowen calm and watchful, their eyes filled with silent questions I couldn't answer. Whatever waited beyond Gate 9 wasn't empty. It was waiting for us. Stepping through Gate 9 felt exactly like falling asleep in the wrong place. Sudden, irrational, and suffused with a nauseating tilt of perspective. My bones seemed to pivot without permission. My lungs flattened and expanded in the wrong sequence. Gravity hesitated just long enough to trigger instinctual panic before snapping sharply back into alignment. I caught myself on reflex, one knee dropping heavily onto grit and ash, hands bracing automatically as the thin fabric of reality stitched itself back together around me. I coughed sharply, lungs squeezing shut against sudden acidic dryness. I opened my eyes, squinting, blinking away blurred edges. The world through the gate had the texture of old photographs, muted, grainy, stripped of saturation. Shadows lay thin and sluggish, dragging across surfaces like spilled ink. Everything smelled burned. Cold ash mingled with a subtle metallic aftertaste like rust dissolving on my tongue. Around me, the rest of the recon team staggered slightly, righting themselves against the sudden disorientation. Arden swayed, pale, glasses askew, lips parted in breathless wonder or quiet dread. Lowen stood utterly motionless, head bowed, eyes closed momentarily in private communion with something internal and intangible. I checked quickly. 4 combat controllers behind me, weapons at low ready, their faces masked behind polarized visors. The aperture was still behind us, an unnatural disc suspended above the powdered earth, rippling like disturbed oil. Slowly I straightened, flexing fingers around the grip of my carbine. Our entry point mirrored precisely the underground chamber we'd just left, but transmuted by catastrophe. Walls were charred stone and warped metal, melted in slow ribbons toward the floor. Equipment consoles leaned inward as though gently pressed by enormous hands. Screens were blank but not shattered, as if they had simply stopped existing mid-function. Beyond our immediate radius of flashlights and infrared beams lay only an unnerving blackness, utterly depthless, promising nothing. "Atmospheric reading stable, Major," one controller, Andrews, reported softly, voice calm but edged with a suppressed tension. "No radiation, no detectable biothreats." I nodded absently, reaching up to adjust the visor overlay integrated into my tactical recon suit. It auto-calibrated instantly, compensating smoothly for atmospheric density, gravity deviations, ambient electromagnetic fields, all with a disquieting silence, as though even our technology preferred to remain unnoticed here. Arden stumbled forward cautiously, kneeling to touch the powdery residue coating the chamber floor. It drifted gently away from his fingers. "It's carbon," he murmured softly, "mostly pulverized bone and graphite. It shouldn't be this fine, almost artificially reduced." He glanced upward at me, visibly shaken, yet strangely exhilarated. His fingers twitched restlessly, seeking something tangible in abstract theories. "Knox, what could pulverize a whole world into this?" "That's what we're here to find out," I replied firmly. Arden's questions weren't meant for answers yet. I knew that look. He was talking only to keep his reason anchored, his intellect searching desperately for stability. He'd never truly left the lab until now. I had seen men like him crumble quickly if they weren't grounded firmly in a task. The hallway beyond the chamber spiraled upwards, identical to the Epsilon layout we'd left behind, but rendered alien and unfamiliar by warped stone and broken vitrified walls. Ash trickled steadily down from cracks overhead, dusting shoulders and visors as we moved silently upward, tracking past empty alcoves and sealed doors whose labels had melted into illegible streaks. I noted Chaplain Lowen quietly bending down, placing small, insignificant objects, a single coin, a broken shoelace, at intervals along our path. It wasn't superstition exactly, more like a ritual of witness. He glanced up, catching my gaze. "So something remembers us," he said quietly, before moving on. I did not respond, unsure if he spoke to me or to himself. The first distorted body appeared near the entrance to what should have been gate control. It stood immobile against a scorched wall, twisted limbs raised defensively, as if shielding itself from unbearable heat or light. No clothing or markings remained, only fused carbon and shattered bone compressed into a solid blackened form. I approached cautiously, flashlight beam tracing the body's contours slowly. No face, no features, just smoothed, vitrified planes. Yet I felt profoundly certain this had once been a living man. "There's another here," Andrews whispered tensely. More beams illuminated others now, figures scattered through the room in various postures of frozen agony or futile resistance. My breathing slowed instinctively, forcing calm into my limbs. "They're not petrified," Arden breathed, voice brittle with barely restrained fascination. "They're recorded. The carbonization, the vitrification, it's precise. It's not destruction, it's preservation." "Preserved by what?" Lowen asked gently. Arden's eyes flashed briefly with frustration, his response sharp and desperate. "That's why we're here, isn't it? To find out what did this. What could look at a world and decide this is what's left?" His voice faltered, caught somewhere between awe and rising dread. "It didn't just kill. It chose what to keep." A subtle, rapid flicker of my HUD drew my attention sharply downward. The neuromorphic drones we'd sent ahead transmitted images, distorted tessellations of hallways and twisted landscapes. Their autonomous logic was struggling, unable to pass the non-Euclidean irregularities they encountered. Something was profoundly broken in Ash Earth's geometry. Even technology designed explicitly for hostile terrain was failing silently, profoundly, in the face of the inexplicable. "Major," Andrews' voice again, quiet urgency now bleeding through. "Movement ahead. Thermal's negative, but it's shifting." We advanced cautiously into the room's far end, weapon-mounted lights slicing carefully through drifting ash. Statues blocked our path, twisted poses shifting between glances, like frozen dancers inching secretly forward when unobserved. My pulse climbed, heart pounding insistently against the discipline I maintained. Fear was manageable. It was rational to fear the unknown. But this undermined the basic contract of reality. Lowen drew softly beside me, eyes never wavering from the shapes as they shifted closer, inches at a time, almost gentle. He spoke softly, rhythmic, as if soothing something frightened yet lethal. "It watches, Major. We're being witnessed as we witness. Perception shapes this place as surely as it shapes us." "Are they hostile?" Andrews hissed, tightly controlled panic edging into his voice now, his finger trembling imperceptibly near the trigger. "Not yet," I murmured, lowering my rifle deliberately, fighting down the raw impulse of violence. Lowen's presence steadied me. There was more than one way to face danger. "Keep eyes open. Don't blink unless you have to. Move slow." As we stepped forward carefully, a metallic sheen caught my attention, embedded in the chest of a nearby figure. Stepping closer, I recognized the familiar outline of a steel plate, burned precisely into the carbonized form's torso, the words etched coldly familiar. "We burned. It watched. Now it's your turn." I glanced back toward Arden, whose fascination had twisted now fully into dread. Lowen stood unmoving, watching me closely, waiting. The statues around us seemed stiller now, as though satisfied or momentarily appeased by our acknowledgement. "Major," Lowen finally spoke, voice quiet but absolute. "We're not just here to watch. We've been invited deeper in." I nodded slowly, eyes steady on the silent figures. The statues stared eyelessly back, utterly still, patiently waiting. Somewhere beyond them, deeper in the ash and ruin, something unfathomably vast and terrible waited too, observing silently, shaping reality through the act of witnessing alone. "Then let's not keep it waiting," I said quietly, stepping forward into the dark. We moved through corridors that twisted beneath our feet, angles softening into curves that disoriented more than outright defied reason. The further we traveled into Ash Earth, the more tenuous our sense of reality became. A constant, low-grade dissonance, like watching a familiar film slowed slightly, voices subtly distorted, colors drained and warped by degrees. My recon suit compensated mechanically, minutely adjusting gravity stabilizers and sensor filters every few meters. But the constant recalibration created an unsteady nausea. Arden lagged behind slightly, muttering quietly into the small recorder clipped to his vest. The man was visibly unraveling. His voice came in fragile bursts, increasingly detached from scientific composure. Gravitational constant, anomalous, ambient electromagnetic interference increasing exponentially, geometric integrity deteriorating, no rational cause. His sentences fractured, ideas slipping through his fingers like grains of sand. Science was his faith, and it was betraying him here, cruelly stripping away his anchors of logic and certainty. Ahead, Andrews halted abruptly at the edge of a wide threshold, shining his rifle-mounted flashlight across a fractured steel door. The inscription above it, partly fused by heat, remained readable: Archive Control. The doors themselves were warped inward, forced open and bent like molten wax cooled mid-motion. Lowen stepped carefully forward, eyes fixed intently on the opening, his voice low and measured, almost liturgical. Someone wanted inside desperately. I raised my rifle instinctively as we moved through the twisted entrance into the dim expanse beyond. The room stretched outward, circular walls ringed by towering data terminals, standing like dark monoliths encircling a raised central console. Thick layers of ash blanketed every surface, drifting lazily through still air currents that seemed to move without any perceivable source. Bodies stood frozen here too, vitrified shapes posed in frantic actions, reaching, fleeing, cowering. Arden crossed toward the central console, stumbling slightly, breath coming faster as he brushed away a thick coat of dust. Beneath lay a half-melted control surface, keypads warped and screens burned black. He adjusted his visor's scanner attachment, voice shaking as he whispered, "There's data here, residual fragments, quantum memory imprinting, maybe retrievable." "Do it," I said quietly, stepping aside to allow him room. Arden activated a small neuromorphic analysis node, linking it carefully into the console. It twitched sharply, organic-seeming filaments embedding into the burned-out interface, desperately trying to reconstruct coherence from corrupted remnants. The node fluttered erratically, synapses visibly glowing beneath translucent carbon casing, revealing how closely these devices skirted the line between tool and organism. Arden watched it tensely, eyes fever-bright with anticipation and anxiety. "Knox." Lowen's voice was soft, calling my attention away from Arden's efforts. The chaplain stood near a shadowed alcove, facing something concealed just beyond our light. His stance was perfectly still, voice layered with calm, masking profound unease. I moved swiftly to his side, flashlight beam illuminating what had transfixed him. A figure sat slumped against the wall, fused into the metal behind it, torso twisted awkwardly, arms raised as if protecting something precious. Its face had melted away completely, leaving only a smooth, featureless mask of dark glass. Between its scorched hands, resting gently on its lap, lay a small recording device, entirely untouched by damage, its smooth edges gleaming under layers of ash. Lowen glanced at me, a silent question. I nodded once. He knelt gently, carefully prying the device free from petrified fingers. As he activated it, we both leaned closer, instinctively drawn by its fragile promise of understanding. Static hissed briefly, shifting suddenly into a trembling voice. Male, exhausted, strained by terror and hopelessness. It's everywhere now. We tried to measure it, but it's like trying to measure fire with paper. The waveform. It doesn't just react. It observes us back. We called it the Sunda. Don't know who named it. Fits somehow. We studied it, and it studied us, learned our shape, our dreams, our fears. Then it stripped us down to our simplest forms, preserved only what it needed, discarded the rest, but why? The voice paused, breathing raggedly. Nowhere to run. If you're hearing this, then you came through the gate. It knows you're here already. Your knowing makes it stronger, makes it real. The only chance is... The recording ended abruptly, snapping into silence. Lowen lowered it slowly, his eyes meeting mine. Arden stood frozen nearby, fingers hovering tensely above the node interface, having heard every word clearly. The Sunda. Arden breathed, tasting the name for the first time, dread and fascination blending on his tongue. It's a recursive observer. Reality becomes unstable when observed by something else aware of the observation. It's quantum theory on a planetary scale. What does that mean practically? I asked. Arden shook his head slowly. It means we've changed it already, just by knowing it exists. Our perception reinforces its presence. It's not here physically, not exactly, but it's woven itself into the fabric of this place. He glanced downward, visibly shaken, his fingers curling inward with helpless anxiety. Lowen laid a reassuring hand gently on Arden's shoulder, anchoring him firmly. The chaplain's calm was immovable, but I could see lines around his eyes tightening subtly, evidence of the tremendous strain beneath his composed exterior. Behind us, Andrews and the others shifted restlessly, their visors turned outward, scanning nervously for threats tangible enough to understand, to shoot at, to defend against. But the threat we faced now couldn't be confronted with bullets or armor. A sudden movement caught my eye. At the room's periphery, a figure, previously frozen mid-stride, now stood fully upright, head cocked gently sideways as though listening. My pulse quickened painfully, muscles locking tight as more figures shifted slowly around the room, each subtly reorienting to face us. The statue's postures adjusted silently, flowing like fluid metal, inch by inch, closer and more intent. Arden's breath caught audibly beside me. It's accelerating, Arden whispered. Our awareness is amplifying it. Every moment we stay, every discovery we make, increases its strength. Then we've learned enough, I responded quietly but firmly, rifle raised now, voice sharp and controlled. Collect the data you have. We're falling back. Lowen looked at me steadily. And go where, Major? Back to the gate? Back home? It's already noticed us. What's stopping it from following? I met his eyes evenly, feeling the bitter truth behind his words settle inside me. Lowen was right, as always, his measured honesty unyielding. Arden's eyes widened in sudden realization. He'd already reached the same conclusion. We're trapped in a loop, Arden murmured, voice brittle, resigned. The more we observe, the stronger it grows. The stronger it grows, the harder it becomes to escape its observation. We've become part of its cycle. The silent statues watched impassively, featureless faces reflecting nothing, utterly patient, utterly still. Yet every one of us could feel the crushing weight of invisible eyes pressing closer from every direction, demanding recognition, demanding acknowledgement. Then we break the cycle, I said finally, forcing authority into my voice. Find a way to blind it before it sees everything. We retreated quickly, boots crunching over layers of compacted ash and pulverized bone. My rifle felt useless against the threat that stalked us. Behind our hurried steps, statues shifted, whispers of ash reshaping themselves into new silent configurations. They moved, when unobserved, defying geometry, mocking our attempts at vigilance. Hold formation, I ordered sharply, glancing back at the team. Eyes open, don't let them out of sight. Arden stumbled beside Lowen, clutching the data recorder and muttering in barely coherent loops of quantum theory and philosophy. His eyes darted back and forth, pupils dilated behind the scratched glass of his lenses, his logic visibly fracturing beneath waves of cognitive dissonance. Lowen guided him carefully, maintaining quiet composure despite the strain etched clearly into his expression. The chaplain had seen countless men unravel in the face of war, but never before a war fought against reality itself. The statues crowded closer as we neared the stairwell descending back toward Gate 9. Limbs contorted, each now openly posed in an attitude of stark accusation. My flashlight beam sliced across featureless faces. They judged us for our presence, our intrusion, our very act of witnessing their tragedy. "Major!" Andrew's voice cracked urgently from behind me, sharp with barely restrained panic. "Exit path compromised, completely blocked." Ahead, thick clusters of vitrified figures crowded tightly in surreal formations, arms intertwined grotesquely, an impenetrable barrier of fused carbon and bone. Their silent defiance was absolute, implacable. We were being funneled, deliberately herded away from escape routes. "This isn't random," Arden rasped suddenly, eyes snapping into focus with unsettling clarity. "It's testing us, forcing choices. It wants something from us." "What could it possibly want?" I demanded harshly, forcing myself calm through sheer discipline. "To see how we react," Lowen said quietly. "We're part of the observation now. The experiment isn't over yet." A tremor vibrated subtly beneath our feet, a soft ripple like a tectonic sigh reverberating through concrete and steel. Dust trickled from overhead, dancing lazily through my flashlight beam. Andrews staggered slightly, glancing upward with visible alarm. "It's accelerating," Arden said hollowly, as if in distant awe. "The waveform is destabilizing reality." Another vibration followed, sharper, more distinct, accompanied by the distant, muffled roar of stone collapsing and metal twisting. The corridor buckled gently beneath us, tilting by degrees, angles becoming distorted. My equilibrium swayed dangerously, inner ear protesting violently against the disruption of spatial logic. "We have to move!" I snapped, urgency slicing cleanly through mounting dread. "There's another route, a service shaft, parallel corridor B6. The squad pivoted sharply, weapons raised reflexively as reality began to fracture visibly around us. Walls cracked open, seams splitting gently like skin under a careful blade. Shimmering distortions rippled through concrete, bending surfaces inward, stone and metal curling gently into graceful loops, as though surrendering willingly to invisible sculptors' hands. We sprinted through increasingly distorted passages, following corridors whose original design had warped into something dreamlike and utterly foreign. Angles melted smoothly into curves, doorways elongated vertically, stretching thin. My HUD stuttered intermittently, spatial mapping software choking helplessly on shifting dimensions. The dissonance of perception shredded at the edges of my sanity, disciplined composure straining beneath cognitive assault. A sudden violent distortion rippled directly ahead, air shuddering visibly. Andrews had no time to react. The corridor ahead collapsed instantly into itself, walls and ceiling folding inward like a collapsing origami puzzle. His scream was lost in a crunch, abrupt and final. Ash billowed outward silently, swallowing sound, erasing evidence. "Move!" I barked desperately, herding the survivors sharply sideways through another half-collapsed doorway, forcing aside a twisted metal panel. Arden stumbled heavily, nearly dropping the data node. Lowen caught him firmly. "Keep going, Doctor," he urged quietly. "Stay with us." The room we entered was distorted beyond recognition. Walls curved inward, forming an irregular dome overhead, consoles bent and twisted elegantly, now resembling abstract sculptures rather than functional objects. Ash floated freely here, undisturbed currents drifting slowly, caught in invisible eddies. I turned, rifle nearly useless in my shaking grip. Lowen stood silently near the doorway, facing the chaos beyond with quiet resignation, his journal open gently in his palm. I realized abruptly what he was doing, marking our passage even now, leaving a final trace of human intent behind. "Lowen," I started, voice tight with frustration and guilt. "Move." He glanced back at me, calm eyes shadowed by sadness. "It's important that something remains, Eric. Something human, something to show we existed, before the silence takes us." I stared at him helplessly, caught between anger and gratitude, but I couldn't find words to respond. Instead, I turned toward Arden, who knelt near a collapsed terminal, frantically interfacing the neuromorphic node into the remaining console. Filaments writhed hungrily, desperate for a stable connection. "What are you doing?" I demanded urgently. "Sending what we've learned back," Arden said hurriedly. "Quantum entanglement. Maybe it'll reach Site Epsilon. Maybe not, but this knowledge, someone else needs to understand, even if we don't leave." I felt my chest tighten painfully, swallowing thickly as comprehension set in. Arden's eyes were steady now, free of doubt, clear in sacrifice. A deeper vibration rattled violently now, reality buckling visibly, waves rippling sharply through air and matter alike. It felt like standing beneath ocean currents, pressure building painfully within my skull. Outside the warped doorway, statues crowded silently, blocking all paths outward. Faces turned expectantly inward, patiently waiting. "We're trapped," Arden whispered, resignation settling visibly into his posture. Lowen shook his head firmly. "No, Doctor, we're here. We're bearing witness. That still matters. There's meaning, even in loss." I lowered my rifle slowly, muscles slackening involuntarily, realizing suddenly the bitter futility of fighting what we couldn't even define. Reality itself had become hostile territory. Survival, tactics, mission, all lost meaning beneath the overwhelming certainty of cosmic indifference. Yet I refused to surrender. Not entirely. Something within me hardened stubbornly, ancient defiance igniting beneath layers of discipline and duty. If this was observation, an experiment by something incomprehensible, then perhaps it needed to be challenged directly. Perhaps it needed resistance. "Then we finish what we started," I said finally, voice low and controlled, infused now with a fierce clarity. "If it's observing us, let's show it something worth seeing. Let's face it directly." Lowen nodded silently, understanding dawning in his eyes. Arden glanced upward slowly, breathing, steadying gradually. Outside, beyond fractured walls, beyond patient statues and silent ash, something immense and incomprehensible waited, observing quietly, indifferent yet curious, watching closely now. And I chose deliberately to stare back, to confront it directly, openly defiant, finally accepting that the only true fight left was not survival, but understanding. We moved upward, ascending through the warped remnants of the facility toward the surface. The structure groaned around us, shifting, as if reluctantly allowing us passage. Corridors twisted in spirals now, surfaces bending like flesh beneath a steady hand. Ahead, fractured daylight seeped through jagged fissures in the outer structure, illuminating drifting ash motes in pale streams. It was the first true light we'd seen since crossing the gate, cold and spectral, yet oddly inviting. At the shattered threshold leading outside, I paused, letting my eyes adjust carefully to the diffused glow of the surface. Behind me, Arden and Lowen stood quietly. For an instant, nobody spoke. I took a cautious step forward, emerging slowly into the stark openness of ash earth. The landscape stretched away in solemn stillness, an endless grey expanse beneath skies drained of all familiar blue. The horizon blurred softly beneath an eternal haze, indistinct as a half-remembered dream. Great dunes of fine ash undulated gently, shaped by slow, unseen forces. Distant skeletal towers stood frozen in mid-collapse, remnants of cities reduced to abstract outlines etched against the colourless sky. The air was thick with the scent of burnt stone and bitter metal, tinged with a dryness that pulled moisture painfully from skin and lungs. "No life," Arden breathed, voice distant yet steady. "No oceans, no trees, just Absence. Lowen moved slowly past us, stepping out carefully, boots sinking slightly into the powdery earth. He stood motionless, looking outward with profound sadness etched across his face, as if silently mourning an entire world whose passing nobody had witnessed. Quietly, he bent down, placing another small token, a single brass casing from his own sidearm, onto the ash. "So something remembers," he murmured softly, ritual complete. I stepped forward, scanning the emptiness. "We keep moving. Find a defensible position. Wait for the aperture to stabilize. We have a chance to get back if we—" A subtle shift behind me stilled my voice instantly. I turned sharply, heart accelerating. Statues crowded silently now in the open doorway we'd just exited, blocking our return completely. Yet something about their stance was different. They stood utterly still, posed as though expectant, waiting. "They followed us out," Lowen said evenly, voice betraying only the barest trace of tension. "The path back might be clear." I nodded slowly, comprehension dawning in sharp clarity. Arden glanced nervously between the statues and me, fingers flexing anxiously around the data recorder. "We can't all make it," Arden said finally, voice raw with reluctant acceptance. "Not if it wants someone to witness. Someone has to hold its attention." I met his eyes steadily, unspoken understanding exchanged in an instant. Arden looked away, jaw clenched in helpless frustration. Lowen stepped forward. "It should be me," he offered simply, voice calm, prepared for sacrifice. "My role here is to bear witness." "No," I said firmly. "You're needed back home. You're the only one who can tell them what this place really means. They'll believe you, Lowen." He paused, searching my face carefully, weighing my words before finally nodding silently. Arden swallowed thickly, struggling visibly with the guilt and relief intertwined within him. A sudden, deep tremor rippled across the landscape, the earth shifting beneath our feet. My HUD flashed urgently, sensors detecting a massive gravitational anomaly approaching. In the distance, the horizon blurred softly, ash suspended momentarily, defying gravity, drifting upward slowly as though pulled towards something immense just beyond sight. "It's here," Arden whispered, eyes wide, fascinated despite dread. "It's watching us right now." I turned toward the shifting horizon, stepping further away from Lowen and Arden. Statues adjusted, rotating incrementally to track my movement, utterly silent yet undeniably attentive. "Go," I commanded sharply without looking back. "Now." Arden hesitated, then moved swiftly toward the now unblocked facility entrance, Lowen following closely. For an instant, Lowen paused, looking back once, hand raised silently, a final acknowledgement of gratitude and respect. Then they vanished quickly into the shadows. I stood alone, ash swirling gently around me now, air vibrating softly with unseen tension. Shapes emerged gradually from the grey, hundreds more figures rising silently from dunes and fissures, drawing closer. They formed a circle around me, featureless faces turned inward, posture patiently waiting. "If you're watching," I whispered evenly, projecting my voice outward, "then watch closely. I want you to see what humanity looks like unbroken." A surge of raw sensation gripped me, reality flexing, pressing against my senses. The ash began spiraling slowly upward around me, forming delicate vortices like gentle cyclones. Time bent incrementally, moments stretching thinly, drawn tight across perception. I knew instinctively that something beyond comprehension was focused utterly upon me, its attention vast and unfathomable. It observes, it chooses. The phrase resonated clearly. A foreign thought whispered directly into my awareness, unfiltered by voice or language. It was understanding distilled into pure concept. "Why?" I challenged openly, desperation mingled deeply with genuine curiosity. "Why preserve? Why not simply erase us completely?" "Understanding requires observation. Observation requires preservation." "Then understand this," I replied sharply, gathering all my discipline, resolve, every scrap of defiance left within me. We do not surrender quietly, even if defeat is inevitable, even if your power is absolute. We resist. The vortex tightened abruptly, pressure building painfully inside my skull, but I refused to buckle. Memories surfaced forcefully. Oak ridges shadowed fences, the unspoken legacy of my grandfather's haunted silence, my lost men in North Africa, their faces etched permanently into conscience. I gathered them deliberately, weaponized memory as my shield against annihilation. Resistance defines you. It is expected, observed, necessary. I realized suddenly what it meant. It understood humanity precisely because we fought impossible odds, because we faced oblivion openly, defiantly. Our struggle wasn't futile, it was meaningful. It was exactly what made us human. Behind me, deep inside the facility, a sudden flash of energy rippled outward. Arden and Lowen had activated the aperture. It was done. They had escaped. A fierce clarity settled firmly within me. This wasn't defeat, not entirely. We had accomplished something vital, buying precious time, delivering crucial warning. Remember us clearly, I said quietly to the infinite presence observing me, because we'll remember you too. In response, the vortex tightened finally, ash cascading upward violently around me, shapes closing inward patiently, silently. I felt myself fracturing gently, perception thinning incrementally, yet there was no fear now, only acceptance. The last thing I glimpsed was the distant horizon, pale, indistinct, endless. Then reality folded gently inward, sensation fading softly into quiet dissolution. And as I dissolved, as my consciousness faded gently, I whispered a final promise into the emptiness surrounding me, a final act of resistance, the ultimate gesture of human defiance against cosmic silence. Someone will always remember.